everybody could have been the best fund manager in the universe from the second half of 2020 to the first half of 2024 by doing damn nothing. Returns provide zero predictability. So it's like a dice. The issue that gets lost is how much of that is designed by the fund manager and how much of that is by accident. Everyone was talking about 50% per annum returns. How many people said that there was a 55% return from the index? So actually your fund is done 10% lower than what it should have. Many times we see they have got the same fund under different names. So if you have four small caps and the correlation coefficient between the four small caps that one is holding is 9.98 or 98%, it's same to say that I have a fund called X, I have a small cap fund called Y, I have a small cap fund called Z, and another one called A. But all of them are different names. Essentially, I'm having the same scheme. Can the fund manager explain how the fund works in less than a minute? We track funds on 16 statistical parameters, and returns don't make a single one of them.
Mutual fund selection often begins with recent returns. But do those returns reflect a repeatable investment process or a brief market phase? And how can investors understand whether a scheme's risk and portfolio characteristics match their individual needs? To help bring clarity to these questions, we are joined by Mr. Prasunjit Mukherjee, founder and CEO of Plexus Management Services. Drawing on nearly 3 decades of experience across fund advisory, research, and investor education, he shares how investors can look beyond headline numbers and interpret the factors that shape a fund's performance. In this episode of Nivesh Pe Charcha, we explore how investors can move beyond recent returns and adopt a clearer framework for fund selection. We explore Jensen's alpha, beta, volatility, portfolio overlap, and the qualitative factors investors may consider while evaluating a fund. Let's dive in.
Hello, Prasun. Welcome to Nivesh Pe Charcha.
Thanks so much, Mukul. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on the program, sir.
Honor is entirely mine, Mukul.
Wonderful. So this is a very important topic. Over the last few years, we've been hearing a lot about mutual fund sahi hai, and the numbers reflect in the industry's data as well. The AUM has grown, the SIP book has grown. But I think one thing which is underappreciated or underaddressed is maybe not all funds are sahi for everyone. So when it comes to fund selection, what often investors do is that they look at recent returns. Can you please shed some light on how that might be a risky approach and what are the factors that investors should look at when they are actually evaluating funds?
Uh, I think, Mukul, it will make sense to break down the question into three parts. One is, why is a recent return a more riskier approach? That should be one. And the second is, what should people do to find out better suited funds? And let's make it into two questions. So, diving into your first part, whenever we see a fund do a return for a particular time period, whether it is 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, what have you, the issue that gets lost is how much of that is designed by the fund manager and how much of that is by accident. So that will actually give you what is the predictability quotient of that. If I am buying a fund which is nearing, the last two quarter periods has been the top quartile, there is every chance that sustaining that particular scheme in the top quartile or top decile would be a Herculean task because every fund management has got a system where it allocates, and when the allocation maximizes, whereby the returns max themselves out, and from there on it's a downhill ride. That is generally the case all over. So if we see a period to period return and only take that as a benchmark or a barometer, then we are actually we are actually taking every step to ensure that our fund pick fails. See, what we have to understand is that, if we take just this century, there has been 25 Nobels awarded in the field of economics and all that. Out of that, 9 has been in the capital market oriented behavioral economics side. And we are still stuck in the 1940s where this was the only criteria. So essentially, we have to find out how much was the design and how much is the accident. Is there a way to find out? I mean, there are many statistical systems which find out how much is the design and how much is the accident, or at least if not find out by 100%, it definitely gives out data to clear out, zones of ignorance. So we have to use those things. I'm glad to say that in the last 4 or 5 years, the mutual fund industry has seriously upgraded itself, and speaking about things like beta, talking about things like Jensen's alpha, talking about recently we have got tracking error and information ratio, which the fund houses have been trying to put aggressively into the investors' mind and into the distributors' minds too. But still, that is not enough. Even now, we see 90% of, I can at least say it from the distributor side, and I'm definitely sure from the other large marquee distributions and banks and where the constraint is usually the return. So it has, although been a very slow progress on the side of upping the ante on the prevalence tax to use, but chalo shukar hai, we have got something to talk about now. And this lack of predictability, this lack of trying to find out the how much has been uh, ascribed to chance and how much has been can be ascribed to system and design, that will take some time, but we are making small progress on that. So the first two questions, to answer the question very briefly, and to sum up the first question very briefly, returns provide zero predictability. Zero. I mean, you cannot say it's like, it's like a dice. If you have a six coming on a dice, what are the chances that it's going to have a six? So it's 1/6, right? So it's going to be all the time, all the same. So predictability bias is heavily stacked against the return, the point-to-point return index. Second is, and you asked a very important question, investors. Does every investor have the same constraint or criteria for investing? Obviously not. The risk profile is different. The the need for cash or need for liquidity, that could be different. I mean, there are so many other things which come into play that it is very difficult for anyone to have the same criteria for every kind of investment. That's not possible. A guy who starts at 25 will definitely not have the same constraints as a guy who is at 70. Even though the guy, and even then, a guy, two people at 70, one could be having 10 crore uh, of financialized assets within, the other person might be having a lot of, let's say, real estate. The situation could be different, the risk profile could be different, the number of dependents, everything could be different. So, what we ask people to do is, first of all, it's very difficult to find out what the perfect risk profile is and give a number. There are metrics that we are using in that are generally, very popularly used, but most often than not, it is also open to interpretation, which only experience can bring. But there are many other things that we can find out, to basically ascribe a scheme to an investor. For example, I mean, if somebody is not looking for a high risk, how do we find out which scheme is? I mean, even though we have got equity schemes, but we know that every equity scheme is not the same as every other equity scheme. So one scheme might have a risk profile which is very constrained. The other scheme might have a volatility profile which is very constrained. And adjusted to volatility, adjusted to beta, what kind of returns are we generating? Is it some kind of a band? We are not talking that this has to be the best of the line, but is there some kind of a predictability? Is the risk, I mean, is the portfolio changing all the time, or is there a 30% switch from composition to composition every 3 months or 4 months? Because then we know that there is not only there is a lot of velocity in and out of the scheme, but also the fact that it adds to the cost. And I mean, economics, we had learned of something like a knife edge problem. Like if you're traveling on the edge of the knife, at one point of time, the edge becomes so thin that, toppling over is a guaranteed outcome. So you know, we have a lot of things which are available in the statistical domain. We have a lot of research criteria which is uh, come into the mutual fund universe, not only in the recent past, but definitely in the last 40 years. And we are using a lot of them. We are also, I mean, we also ask people, can we have a system that has a predictability bias positively in its favor? And can we use that system positively in the favor of the investor in trying to find out something or the other? As the market matures, as people, investors, distributors, advisors, what have you, as the entire ecosystem matures, we bring in new dynamics because the number of schemes are heavy, are huge. The number of the solutions which are there, they are phenomenal. So unless we have a system that can weed out performers and the non-performers, then we are seriously looking at trouble. I mean, look at every scheme. Every category. Every category has got a minimum of 50 schemes. So how do we find out? And I'm told that very soon we are going to have 70 fund houses. So there is going to be a multiplication of options, right? So how does one find out? This is, I mean, stats, behavioral stats, portfolio analysis. These are things which can, basically marry the needs of the investors to the profile of the schemes.
I think that's a very comprehensive view on why you should not be optimizing for returns, looking at just returns, because
Optimize for returns, don't maximize for returns.
it would, if you are looking only at returns, it would be as good as rolling of a dice.
Oh, yeah.
And fortunately for us, the industry is now generating a lot of data, which you can actually use to kind of improve the odds of a better investment outcome, instead of
Yes.
just looking at return.
I just mentioned
So
that it's been a little late, but thank God it's happening.
thank God for all of us. Uh, but what would be those metrics? I know you mentioned some of these in the passing, like beta information ratio, Jensen's alpha, and things
Yeah.
like that. But could you kind of dive into them with some greater detail?
See, on a personal basis, that is my outlook. I put a lot more emphasis on the risk management. So, on one side, I mean, let's state something like volatility. Volatility is nothing but standard deviation. You have a bell-shaped curve, and you draw a mean line. Deviation from that mean line is a standard deviation. That gives you an inkling of how much the fund can go on either side, on the plus or on the minus. And much more than that, there is something called a beta. So beta is nothing but systemic risk. So if you're part of a system, if you're on an aeroplane, is there a chance of the aeroplane crashing? That chance always exists. Tracking error and information ratio, even though they are more index dependent factors, but still, they are important. And the most important parameter, I think, which the general mutual fund distributor, stroke advisor, and the investor should also keep in mind is, I think, the Jensen alpha. It is a very comprehensive number. What does it take? It takes a time frame, it takes the risk of a fund, it takes beta, and it takes returns over a benchmark. See, the first thing we have to understand is that in the mutual fund space, absolute number means nothing. How much of that is a part, I mean, can be compared to either a benchmark or either to peer. So the peer-to-peer comparison or the peer or the fund to benchmark comparison, that makes a huge difference in trying to find out better how well the fund has returned. So in the good times, everyone was talking about 50% per annum returns.
Yeah.
How many people said that there was a 55% return from the index? So actually your fund has done 10% lower than what it should have. So, the 50% didn't really make sense then. Today, if we are saying that a fund has made 7%, whereas the index is probably down by 2%, then, we can put it in perspective and say that, okay, the fund has done better compared to its benchmark. The fund has done better compared to something X, Y, Z or the other. Uh, a much more detailed option would be, like I said, the Jensen alpha, because not only does it take the benchmark, it also takes into account the risk factor, It also takes into account the total returns which a fund has made. So all put together, it is a composite. And that, I think, in the coming time should be popularized by the fund houses to make it much more amenable to uh, the comprehension of a fund performance. Now, if you were to delve down a little bit deeper, we use something, we also analyze and we have asked people to use two particular analysis. One is called the skewness and the other is called the kurtosis. So the
Okay.
skewness is basically it's a recency phenomena. So
Mhm.
if in the last 1 year a fund has returned, let's say 20%, but the last 8 months the fund has returned 18%, does it make
Okay.
it a good fund?
I mean, I don't want to comment on it, but probably some of the returns have been clustered around the last 8 months.
Exactly, exactly. So that is a clear-cut sign of accident. The second is a kurtosis. Over the last 1 year, we have seen a fund make 20%, but in the period of 4 months to 7 months, the fund had made 60% of that 20%. So 12% was made just because of one period. But effectively, the fund remains high because of that one period overperformance. And then it has peaked down to another level. So these two are very important performance isolators
Okay.
that we can check out, that we ought to check out to find out how the fund has actually done over the course of any time periods. So, and the last thing, the last simple thing that I ask people to do is there has got to be a R squared comparison in their portfolio. Many times we see they have got the same fund under different names. So if you have four small caps and the correlation coefficient between the four first small caps that one is holding is 9.98 or 98%, it's same to say that I have a fund called X, I have a small cap fund called Y, I have a small cap fund called Z and another one called A. But all of them are different names. Essentially, I'm having the same scheme. So I ask people that in the in the portfolio which you have, please make sure that there is a correlation test done all the time, at least once every 3 months, to find out if you're actually holding a diversified portfolio.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So these are generally the constraints that we you know on a very simple basis use. Uh, there are many other things that we bring to the investor. We take a downside ratio. Uh, it is not a capture. We take a downside ratio. We take an upside potential, and we do Sortino analysis. So and see, essentially we track funds on 16 statistical parameters,
Okay. That's
and
that's quite
and
comprehensive.
returns don't make a single one of them.
All right. So basically, from what I'm understanding, the perils of looking at only returns can be seen with some of the things that you have mentioned, something like a skewness. Maybe a fund has returned 20%, but 18% of that has come in the last few months.
Yeah,
So if you're looking purely at returns, you would think this fund is going to be a fantastic performer.
yeah,
And that may not necessarily be the case. There might be accidental returns happening with the fund. Uh,
exactly.
so it's, and then there's the other thing where you might be holding multiple funds, but the performance or the overlap in the performance is so similar that these multiple funds might be just the same fund in a different
In
disguises.
a, exactly, exactly. And we have seen that. We have seen that happen. See, generally, Mukul, what happens is market runs with a binary concept. When it's the time for small cap, everybody runs after small caps. When it's the time for mid caps or themes or large caps or whatever, or gold or silver, we see that there is a straight line movement towards one particular asset class.
Hmm.
Uh, sure, we are to blame for that. I mean, advisors, stroke distributors like us, we are also to be blamed for that because it is easy to sell. If I am going into a small cap boom time and I'm advising diversification by talking about large cap, My investor is going to benchmark me with his neighbor who is investing only in small caps. So I am under pressure to hold up to the numbers. So there is every chance that we are going to go in for whatever is the flavor of the season. Now, when the flavor of the season happens, there is of course a tendency to go in for names which roll easily off the tongue or the memory. So what we do is we go to the market, we go to the shelf, and instead of buying one shampoo in large quantity, we buy four different brands, hoping that they would be different, or perhaps wishing that they would be different, but truth remains otherwise.
Um, I would like to jump back to this point that you had made where you look at 16 different parameters before deciding on a fund, returns not being one of them at all. And you mentioned
Absolute returns are not. Yeah.
And you also mentioned that you talked about Jensen's alpha, you talked about R square, skewness, and kurtosis. Some of these things are slightly better known in the investment industry, and some of these are statistical properties that maybe some of the advisors or the fund houses might be looking at. But since you're looking at 16 parameters, are there some of these things which may not be very well known, highly underappreciated, but still can have a large impact on uh, the suitability of a certain product or the potential for a certain product to actually be better, potentially outperform other products in the
Uh, Mukul, I'm glad that you asked this question. Two of the important statistical numbers that we tend to overlook, they are skewness and kurtosis, for sure. And I cannot stress this enough that you know we this particular thing has got a very significant predictive quality to it. And in trying to see, the whole idea is, can I choose out of the 50 schemes in a category, can I choose the three which make sense, which are differentiated? And the third and the fourth important aspects of what we are doing is the upside ratio and the downside risk. Now, let me try and explain. Let me try and explain what these things are, so we have a better understanding. When we are doing standard deviation gives a degree of movement on both sides of the mean line. So it could be plus minus 3, it could be plus minus 2, or plus minus 1, or whatever. So it gives both sides. But when I'm choosing a fund, and if the fund is always giving me pleasant surprises,
Mhm.
should I be taking that in the same manner as the fund which is giving me unpleasant surprises? So the problem with standard deviation is that we are as comfortable having the plus deviation as we are with the negative deviation. Obviously, that's not the case. If every time I want to have a 9% return and every time I get a 20% markup on that, I'm the last one to complain. If at the same time I'm always getting a 20% deviation from the mean on the downside, then I will perhaps know that even though this particular scheme is looking at a 20% deviation, the range of values will matter from 9% to 20% less than 9. So, can I focus only on the downside and find out how much of a predictability or a downside bias is there for that scheme in the last 4 years? See, what happens with the trend line is, I have never heard of a CEO who goes to his fund manager and says, uh, "Give me 2 units of beta more for the next 6 months. Give me 5 units of Jensen alpha more for the next 6 months." See, these are post-event things. You cannot really structure a portfolio and say, "Okay, let's go back to the numbers and make the structure in such a way that we have those numbers." That's not possible. So, if we use the normal regression principle, and if a trend line moves in a particular manner, there is every every indicator, at least with a 97%, 96% chance, positive chance, that the portfolio will continue to move in the same structured manner as it has in the last 2 years. So this is one quality which the downside risk explains very well. So if I have, I mean, we always talk about how is a portfolio structure dependent on the style. So the downside risk and the upside potential are clear metrics for quantifying the style of a fund manager or a fund house, or generally we cannot put it in a number. Generally, it is very difficult for us to put the entire sequence based in a number and say that, this is for the fund manager style is, or this is what the CIO style is. But if we were to capture post event, we can see the downside risk and the upside potential and see the Sortino and find out exactly what the style system is all about. This is a very evolved concept. Interpretation takes into account a couple of other things too. But essentially, if I am, looking at a very serious effort in analyzing fund performance as well as fund managers' performance, and then I cannot emphasize enough that both are not the same. A fund manager's performance and a fund's performance, they are not the same. So if we have to find out how much is the fund manager's performance, taking a Sortino and a upside and a downside is a lot more sensible, a lot more numeric, and than most of the other things that we have seen. In recent times, we are we have started, experimenting with a lot more non-standardized stats in the mutual fund industry in India. And so we are using facets of topography and topology to look
Okay.
into fund performance. Things that we had done in our grad classes and stuff like that. But given time, I'm sure we will reach there. If the other countries have reached there, there's no reason why we will not.
Okay. So you've talked about how these numbers can give you a very reasonable picture of the fund houses or the fund manager's style as well. Because not a lot of these things are generally captured numerically or quantitatively. But
Right.
even a combination of these ratios, you can actually paint a pretty decent picture of what that would look like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So essentially, we all know about indifference curves, right?
Yeah.
So,
Maybe we all don't know about indifference curves, but yeah, Econ 101.
yeah, Econ 101. Exactly. Exactly. So, we are trying to find a line of best fit between the fund performance, the fund manager performance, and future of the scheme.
Okay. You've given a pretty comprehensive view on the how numbers can actually capture a lot of what the fund actually looks like. But do we also have any reason to go beyond the numbers? Are there some qualitative factors we should be looking at when it comes to fund selection?
See, there are, of course, some reasons we cannot speak over here, but there are other reasons too. So, I mean, the non-quant issue, the number one non-quant issue is the the comfort. If there is a comfort with the fund manager or for the fund management team that they have looked into this particular category for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and they have seen a couple of market cycles, then I would be far more amenable to work with that particular team or to work with that particular manager without that manager having any historical background in the current avatar. So he could have moved from he would have moved from company A to company B, but and launching a new fund. I'm sure every fund house will have to do that. But without having that history, I would be very comfortable to find. I would be very keen to find out that is there a history that he has managed uh, through different market cycles. Everybody could have been the best fund manager in the universe from the second half of 2020 to the first half of 2024 by doing damn nothing. But the real test of the fund manager's skills would have been how has the management been in terms of managing money and assets for 23 to 26 June. So This particular market cycle, when the market again goes back to, let's say, 27,000 of the Nifty or 84,000 of the Sensex or 83,000 of the Sensex, how has the top end, the bottom end, and the redemption end, how has that petered out? So unless this particular length and span of exercise is seen, without going into the full quant theories, and this is not rocket science. Anyone can see between the time in the market when it was at the same level, how has a fund uh, done. The second thing is, I am again, this is my personal theory, which I mean, history has actually proven me right on this. If the scheme has a tendency of adding indefinitely to the number of scripts, it is a problem. That brings into mind two issues. One is the conviction of the fund manager in adhering to the scripts already purchased. So if I am, and the general overrider is whenever we ask the question of fund management team, the I mean I also know what the answer is. Bhaiya, liquidity kahan hai? Okay, now if the liquidity is not there, and if you're not managing 100 trillion uh, AUM in that particular scheme, I'm sure 1,000 crore or 1,500 crore or 2,000 crore fund adding 2% will not really upset the liquidity apple cart of that particular script by a mile. It doesn't really work. So my interpretation of such cases is, I mean, whenever a fund house or whenever a scheme crosses 80, 90, 100, 110, that means a lack of conviction in the holdings of the fund manager. The fund manager himself is not convinced that he'll be adding further on to the portfolio. Yet the portfolio, so there is some kind of a, stasis which persists. खरीद लिया तो ठीक है रह गया अब उस पे मेहनत नहीं है. And the second thing is, can the fund manager explain how the fund works in less than a minute? If you give me highfalutin funda on how the fund manager works, how the entire ecosystem of research and blah blah brings to him sectors, and then there are multiple people who are looking at my simple refrain to that is, I'm getting tired just to hear you speak. Imagine how you will manage to speak. So these are the non-quant aspects that we generally look at. But of course, the biggest red herring in my case would be continuous increase in the number of scripts.
Uh,
As for the
I think
holdings of the fleet,
I think that's not many people actually look at the number of scripts, but based on what you mentioned, maybe that's something they should be looking at
yeah,
when selecting a fund. Uh, we come to the final question, and based on what you've mentioned so far, I have come to realize that your clients are very fortunate that they get this much level of analysis when it comes to fund selection. But not all the investors who are who would be watching this would have that kind of access. So if they were to look at just three parameters which they can actually fairly easily analyze before selecting a fund, what would you recommend to these investors?
number one, number one is Jensen Alpha. आप total absolute point to point returns, rolling returns भूल जाओ, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता आपको. Uh, Number two is beta, and the number three is volatile. Simple concepts, simple to understand, but very telling concepts, but very important concepts for people to understand what they are getting into. See, the thing is, like I said, putting anything in the fund industry, in the fund management industry, on an absolute basis has no value at all. But the moment we start the benchmark comparison on different facets, then things come into perspective. If I am looking for a high growth, low volatility scheme, then please mention that you are looking at a high. I mean, I'm sure the investor himself will or herself will not be able to mention it, but they must need to understand that this is a requirement that they have. These are very simple concepts, simple to understand, simple to see everywhere. And another thing I have as a matter of complaint against the fund industry is uh, why do we not have period to period demarcation for these? Why can't we have a 6 months of Jensen Alpha? Why can't we have a 1 year of Jensen Alpha? And so when we have in our platform, what we do is we provide every kind of detail in terms of time frame. So you find out what a 6 months is, you find out what a years is, what you find out what an 18 months is, so that you can also see a trend. If that beta of that fund, I mean, there are there are two schemes which has returned the same amount, but the beta is one is 60% of the other. So it's a simple thing for me to take a fund which has got a lower beta but the same return.
Makes sense. Yes.
Generally, we do not. Generally, we do not because the availability of data is not there, or availability of that time demarcated data is. And if I am taking a higher risk portfolio in terms of volatility, I'm not saying that the lay audience should be concerning himself or herself with more complex facets of risk containment and stuff. But इतना तो simple है, इतना तो समझ में बनता ही है. And the ecosystem right now is throwing up these things with much higher regularity than it was doing 4 years back. So these are the three things which I think are a lot more important than uh, the pure returns.
Okay, so Jensen's alpha, beta, and volatility.
In
At
that
least look
order.
at these. Okay, in that order as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So at least these before you select a fund.
Yes.
Prasan, thank you so much for taking out the time. I think not a lot of conversations happen around this topic. There is a lot which happens around which fund is suitable for you, but how do you select those funds? What are the parameters you look at? And even if you don't have access to all 60 parameters that you talked about, at least these primary parameters, if you can look at, your fund selection process could improve significantly.
There will be
So
lesser downward surprises, I suppose. Yeah.
that that is basically what we are looking for, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
Thank you once again. Thank you for taking out the time. This has been a very useful conversation, and I'm sure our viewers would learn a lot from this.
Thank you, Mukul, for having me. And it's pleasure, like I said, is entirely mine. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
As Mr. Prasunjit shared, evaluating a mutual fund requires looking beyond recent returns and understanding how those returns were generated. Jensen's alpha can help place performance in the context of the risk taken, while beta and volatility offer insight into how a scheme has moved across different market conditions. Measures such as skewness and kurtosis may indicate whether returns were spread across the period or concentrated within a few months, while correlation checks can reveal whether multiple funds in a portfolio are providing genuinely different exposures. Since these statistical and qualitative factors need to be interpreted alongside an investor's goals, risk appetite, and financial circumstances, it is best to consult your financial advisor before investing. If you like the discussion and would like to know more about Mr. Prasunjit Mukherjee, please click the link in the description below. Until next time.
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिम के अधीन है। योजना संबंधी सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें। म्यूचुअल फंड इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आर सब्जेक्ट टू मार्केट रिस्क्स. Read all scheme related documents carefully.